Hello, everyone, and welcome to another edition of Mormon Stories podcast. I'm your host, John DeLynn. It's November 16th, 2017. We are recording from a secret location in downtown Salt Lake City. And I have to say, and I say this often, but this is one of the most exciting interviews for me in a long, long time. Oftentimes we try and kind of mix things up and find novel or even celebrity kind of interviews because we want to make sure that the people stay engaged and stay interested and enjoy these interviews. But we regularly get feedback that that listeners sometimes just like hearing from, we'll say, average members, Mormons or post-Mormons, and just kind of better understand people's individual journeys. Now, I'm not going to claim that the people that I'm about to interview, Mel and Stu, are average. They're phenomenal people. They're some of my favorite people on the planet. They're actually dear, close friends. And in some ways, they've been alongside my journey in sort of deep and meaningful ways. But I met them in Cache Valley years ago as I was going through my stuff with the disciplinary councils and the excommunication. That's kind of when, for me, Stu and Mel kind of burst onto the scenes. But they have a really cool story. In some ways, a very traditional Mormon story for many, many years, kind of born and raised in the church, Orthodox, active, devout members, return mission for Stu, and many other kind of cool, normal sorts of Mormon things. But a way that it's a little bit interesting or novel is that, Stu kind of was living in Cache Valley when I was there. He was very supportive of what I was going through, and something that is also probably pretty interesting or relevant is that Stu's faith journey sort of began before Mel's did. And so in that sense, they had to deal with a mixed faith marriage and a mixed faith marriage while Mel was pregnant, which was its own complicating factor, and with kind of young kids. And so we're going to be talking about them as Orthodox members. We're going to be talking about Stu's faith crisis. We're going to be talking about what that was like for Mel as she remained a believer and he wasn't. And we're going to talk about kind of how they navigated that, and then kind of what allowed Mel to kind of become more sympathetic and supportive of Stu's concerns. And then we can get to the really interesting and compelling stuff, which is kind of how they navigated mutually a faith transition, and then finally kind of how they've rebuilt a life after. And these are two really special people. They're both entrepreneurs. Stu runs a moving company. Mel sells jewelry online, and they also have young kids. So a lot here, a lot that's really interesting. And I'm just super excited to welcome Mel and Stu to Mormon Stories podcast. So hey guys.
Hey John.
Thanks for joining us.
Oh, thanks for inviting us.
Yeah, all the way down from Cache Valley.
Yeah.
Do you want to make a shout out to Cache Valley, Aggies? Anything?
Go Aggies.
Go Aggies.
Yep. Maybe next year.
Yeah. Well, it's still basketball, right?
Yeah.
All right. So the way I usually like to start is just by having you guys each kind of talk a little bit about your Mormon ancestry, and then talk about your early years in the church and kind of what the church meant to you. So Mel, why don't we start with you? Talk just a little bit about, if you even know a little about your Mormon ancestry and kind of how that informed your upbringing in the church.
Yeah. So my dad, he's always been really strong and faithful in the church, and his parents and grandparents and great-grandparents. So just a long line of just all being in the church. My mom, she converted when she was 22. So
where was she living?
Colorado.
Okay.
So.
And where'd they meet?
They met at a singles ward. And
where?
In Utah.
In Utah.
Yep.
Okay.
And yeah, then they ended up getting married. And
so you were born in the covenant?
Yep.
Yeah. How many siblings?
I've got 2 older sisters and an older brother.
So you're the youngest of 4.
Yep.
So-
I actually have another brother, Ryan, that would have been 2 years older than me, but he died when he was 4 months old, so I never met him. So there would have been, 5 living before. Yeah.
Okay.
Yep.
All right. And so you were raised where primarily?
In Orem.
Okay.
So born and raised there.
Is that Mountain View? What high school? Orem High?
My sisters went to Mountain View, and then they built Timpanogos, the new school, but then I actually went to Orem High because a bunch of my friends went there. So I went to Orem High School.
Okay. So that's like BYU ground zero, right?
Yeah.
Kind of, right?
Happy Valley.
Happy Valley. That's intense. Utah County is intense,
Yeah,
right?
it is.
So talk about what the church meant to you growing up, both in your family, but also your identity and your spirituality.
Yeah. I was always happy in the church. Didn't know anything different. Never had questions, never had doubts. Always just straight arrow kid. I mean, I was pretty much the poster child for Mormonism. Never touched alcohol, never tried drugs, never, didn't mess around too much with guys. Just really good, solid kid. If there was a rule, I was going to follow it. So I was kind of more black and white. But I was happy in it. I had really good friends. I didn't really know anyone that was, when they would talk about doing missionary work and trying to be a missionary for other people. I didn't really know anybody that wasn't Mormon from where I live. All my neighbors, my family, my friends, everyone was just Mormon in the church. So, yeah. But I was happy with it and did my thing.
What were some of the Mormon rituals that your family would engage in? To what extent was Mormonism informing your family life?
We would do our family home evening, and we'd go to church every Sunday. If we went camping, we'd go camping a lot. We had a little trailer, and we'd go down to Mount Pleasant, and we'd go to Sacrament on Sunday. So we'd drive into town, we'd go to whatever random ward that was there, and then we'd go to Sacrament, and then we'd come back and go camping for the rest of the time. So, my family was really in, and I was always made sure that I went to church. So if I stayed up late the night before on Saturday, I would feel guilty if I didn't go to church. So if I was exhausted and church was at 9 o'clock and I stayed up super late the night before, I was like, well, Melinda, if you have an excuse not to go to church because you're tired, well, then maybe you shouldn't have stayed out the night before. So it's I kind of had this, and I just kind of governed over myself like that too. I was always just really strong, solid testimony, and just was all in, My family was all in. And, yeah.
Did you get the sense that your parents were Orthodox believers?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yep. And my mom, the church was really good for her because she kind of had a hard childhood. And that was the first time she ever felt love, was she had got invited by some Relief Society sisters to go to church, the Mormon church, and that was the first time she felt loved in her entire life, and that's when she was 22. So I know, the church means a lot to her, because that provided her peace, and, she got a strong relationship with God and has a good relationship with Him and feels like she can get answers from Him. So it was a good thing for her, for sure. And my dad, that's just kind of all he knew, yeah.
Did they serve in callings? In the Lord, leadership callings?
Yeah, my dad would be first counselor in the bishopric, and he would be one of the clerks. So on Sunday, he'd spend a bunch of hours there doing the finances and stuff like that. My dad's a civil engineer for BYU. He retired several years ago. But went to school at BYU, got a job there, worked there till he retired. And yeah, just all the typical, callings that they'd have.
Okay.
So.
What about your personal spiritual life as a child and adolescent? Did you kind of ever say, I want to really know that this is true, I want to make sure that it's right for me, and have those moments where you would pray or study or really try to get your own testimony versus rely on the light of your parents?
Not really. I never had some big wow moment. It was just I always believed it. I just always was I was taught that this is true. I believe that it's true. I've had good experiences. I'm happy here. I feel that it's true. So I always just, and then I'd have different lessons or things that I remember lessons in seminary that would say, if you have any music that has bad words in it or swear words in it, maybe throw those away. I'm like, okay. So I'd throw them away. I would just listen to what they said. I'm like, oh, that's a good idea. And I was strong. If people had suggestions to be better, I went for it. Yeah.
So self-improvement, growth mindset.
Yeah.
Were you, what extracurricular activities did you do in high school?
Soccer, dance, and gymnastics. So I kind of just switched around. My parents would let us do like one sport at a time. So I would do dance since I was younger for several years. And then I was like, oh, I'll take a break from that. And then I did gymnastics for several years. And then I got into soccer, did that for 4 years. So just kind of bounced around. I never got like hardcore into it, like never played any sports like in high school. I did dance in high school, but it wasn't like the drill team. For me, I really like balance in my life. And I could have gone far in gymnastics. My mom had a friend that would teach people gymnastics, like that could go to like Olympics and stuff like that. She taught at a really good studio that really pushes people. And I did that for like a week, and it was just intense. And I would have to take a bus I was like 13 or 14. I'd have to take a bus to go there, be there for hours, take a bus home, took all day. So I just didn't want to commit everything. So I'm like, I need time to play, but I want time to have a sport and develop a talent. I want to have time for friends. When I was older, I wanted time to have a job so I could make money, so I could go shopping and buy things I wanted. So I'm always try to have a balance in all things. I don't want one thing to consume all of my time. So.
Were there ever any points in your teenage years where you had doubts about the church or questions or?
No, never.
Or bad experiences in the church?
Nope, I loved it.
What were your favorite experiences being a teenage Mormon?
Like girls' camp. I have so many great experiences from girls' camp.
Like what?
Just like really got along with the leaders, and like we would just have fun, and like I always got along with adults too, and like we just have fun. I don't know, just going to just doing the fun different things that we would do at girls' camp.
Singing
and we'd laugh
songs.
and we'd sneak girls like donuts and just random things. Like we would just, I don't know, just overall everything was just fun. I was just a happy kid, happy, positive kid. Just went along with the flow with everything. I remember when like Hinckley came out with, to have just one earring for women, men, whatever, just to have like one ear pierced. And I recently, probably a year before, had gotten a second one just to have like a stud in my ear and then have another one, And as soon as he mentioned to take it out, like I took it right out. I didn't question it at all. I was like, okay. I believed in you got to follow the prophet and whatever's taught in the small things. So then we could follow and be obedient in the big things, and never questioned anything.
What were your goals as a teenage Mormon? What were you fighting for, like your life goals?
I just wanted to be a good kid and not have any regrets. So I made sure not to cross any like for the drinking alcohol thing, I never even tried a sip of it. Because for me, I'm like, even if I just had a sip of it, then if somebody asked me, have you had alcohol before? I would have to say yes. But then I'd feel like I'd have to justify, well, I only had a sip. I'm like, but I still would have to say yes. So I was adamant about like, I'm not gonna cross any line. I'm not gonna touch it. And I didn't allow myself because I knew that would be a regret. So I was really I've always been good about looking into the future and seeing what is the future going to look like? Am I going to regret this for my kids? So every decision I made, it was like, could this possibly be something that I don't want to have to explain later on? So when I have kids, I don't want to have pictures of me wearing tank tops or something or whatever was against the rules, because how am I going to explain that to my kid? Like, I need to be the example for myself and for other people around me. So I was always like, I want to be a good example to my family, my friends, my future family, friends, whatever. So I was hardcore.
Okay. And what were your big life goals? When you're 90 and you wanted to check off the boxes for a life well lived, what were the big boxes?
Just being clean and pure and following the rules that the church kind of...
What were those big ones?
Like not having sex before I was married. Just all those, like, I wouldn't watch rated R movies because they said not, the rules not to watch them. Same thing, not drinking, not doing drugs, like any of that stuff. But even when I had friends, But
what about like the life decisions? Not just the things you didn't do,
Gotcha.
but the things you wanted to make sure you did in life.
Yeah, I wanted to go to college. That was important to me. So I guess my goal in life was I always wanted to be young and successful. Like that just got me motivated and excited. And for me, I wanted to have a really good job. I wanted to make good money, and I wanted to be I earned that. That was my hard work that I did for that. So wanted to get married, have a family, have kids.
Married how and where?
I wanted to make sure I married a returned missionary in the temple. And not just, I didn't want just a returned missionary. He needed to be a faithful one that went for the right reasons. I'm I don't want to marry a missionary just because he went, but then find out he was a troublemaker and his heart wasn't in it. So like I wanted someone that was like really into it. I wanted to raise a family in the church, and I wanted me and my husband to be on the same page. That was very important to me. So like I wouldn't even date people or guys that I feel like couldn't take me to the temple. So that's the thing. If I would look at someone, if they like were breaking the rules in any way, it was like, okay, I can't ever be serious with this guy. Like if I saw someone like they had tattoos or they were seemed like a troublemaker, like I'm like, okay, we can hang out, but I'm not gonna let myself date you or get serious with you because I don't want to risk falling in love with this person and then wanting to marry them. Like I wasn't gonna put myself in that position, you know. So I was really careful about just dating really, really good, solid guys that had the same values and morals as me. And yeah.
So temple marriage to a devout Mormon guy, kids,
Yep.
and to be a kind of entrepreneurial yourself.
You know, I didn't know anything about that when I was younger. So that's something that's just shifted within the past few years.
But you said you wanted to be financially successful.
Yeah, like I figured just get a job, like
Okay.
get a good career, working for somebody else, getting
Okay.
paid good money.
Got it.
Like that was important.
Now
to me.
that's a little bit of a departure from the traditional Mormon path in the sense that maybe, especially when you were growing up, Mormon women were raised to be homemakers. So for you to have ambitions around actually a career and making money, did you feel different in that way? Did you ever notice that maybe wasn't the path that most women aspired to within the church?
A little bit, yeah. But I figured, I don't know how long it's going to take me to get married. I know I want to get married and I'm going to raise kids and be in the church, and I want to raise my kids. So I knew I wasn't going to be working forever. I never planned on working while I had kids. But I just figured, hey, if I graduate, and if I want to be young when I graduate, so, graduated when I was 22 from college, and then want to make sure I had a career lined up and making good money. Like, who knows when I'm going to get married? It could be a couple years, and then if it takes us a couple years to have kids, at least I've got a good maybe 4 years or so, who knows, where I can be making good money and, be able to get a nice house, buy those things that I want, and, just feel good about being, like, successful, and, like, I earned that, and I worked for that, and just always was excited about that stuff, like, thinking a little bit above the box and not just, I don't know.
Nice. Other happy memories other than girls' camp as a Mormon teen or young adult? Youth conference, temple trips, dance festivals, like stake dances.
I love going to
ward
the
dances.
I love going to the stake dances because I love dancing. That was my passion in life. Like that was my stress reliever. That was my exercise. That was with my friends, listening to the music loud. Just like loved it. That made me happy. So I went dancing a lot. So like I had my little dance classes in school that I would do, but then we'd go to, like once a week I'd try to go to whatever, dances were going on. So had really, really good, solid friends that were just strong in the church too. So like we could talk about deep things or have fun together and keep it real, but they were good examples. So there was no way I was going to get in trouble with these friends. So.
Any seminary?
Yep, went to seminary. I was class, was it seminary or maybe it was just, maybe it was seminary. I was a class president in high school. Not of just of that class, like the class I was in, but.
4 years of seminary?
Yeah, 4 years
Did you
of
enjoy
seminary.
that?
Yeah, and it was nice, in Orem at least, we didn't have to do the early morning stuff. Like, it's just pretty much everyone's Mormon, so it was just in the middle of the day, like you could choose when you went. So that was nice to not have to get up. I hear some people would have to get up super early before school and go, so I didn't have to do that. But yeah, I liked it. It was fine. I had no problems with it and didn't know any different.
Did you have a personal relationship with God, like in your prayers and stuff?
Not really.
Why not?
I don't know. For me, like when I would pray, it would just be like, okay, dear Heavenly Father, like thank you for this day. Thank you for, give thanks for the things that I had. And then just basically asking for things that I wanted, I guess. And then it was like, okay, I kind of made the decision in my mind of what I wanted to do. So it was like, this is what I want to do. This is the school I want to go to. Just if that's not what I'm supposed to do, just throw a roadblock in my way or change it. But it was basically, thank you, and this is what I'm going to do. Stop me if that's not the right way.
What about getting direction or answers? Or you never had that expectation?
No, I never really No, I never really did that. And I was a little envious of my mom because I felt like she had a close relationship with God. And I think she had to, she worked really hard for that. And maybe I just wasn't willing to work that hard, or I didn't know exactly what to do, But for her, in her hard times, that's all she had she had nobody else. The only place she could go was to God to find peace, and she worked hard for that. So she'd have a journal, and she'd write to God, and she'd wait and listen, and he'd respond back, and she would write things down. So she would tell me all the time, like, God wants me to do this, and he wants me to write this book, and he wants me to do this. And I was like blown away with, I've never had God tell me stuff to do like that, So I don't know if I was just doing it wrong or I didn't listen. I'm a goer too, so I'm never really good at like the whole just sitting back and just listening, just chilling. Like, I'm a mover and a shaker.
You are.
I'm just wired that way.
You are.
So you see me. But yeah.
So any guilt and shame as a teen?
Nope. I didn't do anything that would give me any reason to have that.
Love it. Love it.
Yeah.
All right.
Like I said, poster child.
All right.
Don't have any awesome stories for you.
Mormon
crazy
dream.
Stuff I did.
Leave it to Beaver.
Yeah.
In the 90s, right?
Yeah.
Right? Is that high school in the 90s, basically?
Yeah. I'm born in 82, so.
High school in the late 90s?
Yeah.
All right. Anything else about your upbringing that you want to mention before we move to Stu?
Miss anything? That's pretty much it.
All right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right, Stu, your turn.
All right.
Tell us your
Yeah, our parents are really similar in that my dad, born and raised in the church. Our famous Mormon ancestry would be, we could trace back to one of Parley P. Pratt's wives, I think his third wife. I can't remember her name. But so my dad was always really proud of that, of, one of the first apostles, and that's something he talked about a lot. But my mom was a convert, just like Melinda's mom. And my parents met in church also, up in Coeur d'Alene, Idaho. My dad had gone on a mission, went to BYU, and was working in Coeur d'Alene. My mom went to Johns Hopkins University.
That's a big deal.
That's a big deal. My mom's super smart. And she taught nursing. She started a few nursing programs, or at least one nursing program, at another university. And so she was working in Coeur d'Alene, Idaho, and had been going to just a family ward every week. And my dad got transferred there, and he showed up and sat on my mom's pew, the one she always sat on, and my mom said, well, I'm going to sit there too. So she went and sat next to my dad, and they ended up talking, and they got married in the Ogden Temple, and then my dad was transferred to Rock Springs, Wyoming, and that's where I was born. And shortly after that, moved to Ogden, so I grew up in Ogden. That's pretty much all I can remember, because I was really little. I have an older brother and a younger brother. We all grew up in the church. It was everything growing up. Always active, always, seemed like there was always something at the church going on, whether it was a road show or, going with my mom for Relief Society. I don't know what they used to call it, activity days, or enrichment, or I remember hanging out in the gym floor underneath the quilt when my mom was doing the quilting, and that was our life growing up.
Was your family pretty devout?
Yeah, I would say super Orthodox. If I had to define it, I'd kind of say we were McConkie Mormons. Mormon doctrine, everything was black and white. And
any examples?
Yeah, so this was when we were married. One thing my dad was really big on, because it says in Mormon doctrine not to play with face cards, because Bruce R. McConkie said they were of the devil, or whatever his reasoning was. And I was uncomfortable with her wanting to play Go Fish or whatever. Like, it just was part of my upbringing that I'm like, no, we don't touch those. And she didn't have that little quirky rule in her family and thought I was weird. Like, I'm just trying to follow the rules, but so yeah, so I think we were pretty Orthodox.
When you were a kid and a teen, did you take it all really seriously?
Yeah. So growing up in Ogden wasn't like growing up in Utah County.
Ogden's got more diversity.
It has more diversity, yeah, which I loved. But I always had two groups of friends. I had my Mormon friends that I went to church with, and then I had my non-Mormon friends that, frankly, I related to more. So I kind of always felt like I was in two worlds, and I never really felt like I needed to try to be a missionary to my non-Mormon friends. But that's, especially in high school, that's really who I hung out with. And then on Sundays and at church activities and scouts, I'd hang out with my Mormon friends.
And then what about just following the rules as a teen? Kids can go crazy.
Sure. So
they can fall astray. They can have.
Yeah, growing up, I really did feel like I had a good testimony, and I believed it. I just wasn't necessarily great at following the rules. And so in high school, I got into a little trouble, would drink a little bit and fool around with girls a little bit. But I'd always feel really guilty about it because during the week, I'd go and just do my thing. And on the weekend, go to church and feel guilty. So I know lately you're interviewing lots of people that have had, bad experiences with bishops and probing interviews. I didn't have any of that. I think my bishops were sick of me coming in and confessing masturbation and, being too open. And I honestly think they were like, just stop, just stop.
So kind of scrupulosity a little
Yeah,
bit. Like
yeah.
hyper conscious.
Yeah, so
confessing.
I kind of did what I wanted, but then I felt really bad about it. And so it was just that cycle of shame and repent and feel clean, but then repeat because.
And, some might say that's just the religious experience of an adolescent.
Yeah.
Others might say, well, that stuff can be really damaging. What was it for you? Was it just, it was sad sometimes and shame, but I got through it? Or do you feel like that stuff actually had some damage?
I think it did have some damage. I think I was always felt like I was good in school and I was relatively smart. But when I got to high school, I suffered with depression, and I think a lot of that came from just the guilt. We're taught that sexual sins are just under murder. So there's murder and then there's sexual sins. And it's like, well, if I'm already masturbating, like drinking isn't any worse than that. And I didn't drink a lot in high school. Later on I did. But we can get to that. I really did. I didn't have a lot of self-esteem in high school. And it had kind of all started right around that sophomore year-ish. And I didn't have much ambition. I was a horrible student in high school. I did run track and cross country, and I got really into ceramics because that was the one high school class I liked. And so I spent a lot of time making pots, and I ended up actually getting a scholarship to Utah State for ceramics, which was the only reason I went to college at all. But yeah, I think it kind of messed with me growing up a bit.
That's hard stuff.
Yeah.
Because once you feel like you're broken, right? You're damaged goods for something that's so normal, right?
Right.
Then what's the point in trying to be too good, right? Because you're kind of.
That's exactly how I felt. I really felt that I was not going to make it to the celestial kingdom. And so when you already feel like you don't have a shot, why try? Mm-hmm. I felt like that quite a bit. But during high school, I always had older friends, and I have an older brother, and he served a mission, and this was before they raised the missionary bar, and you'd see kids that you'd know, and they'd kind of all do the same thing, and then they'd do the quick repentance right before the mission and go. So it was always in the back of my head that, I'll probably end up going on a mission. It was always one of the I'm going to go. Because I did believe, I had the indoctrination, and I'd say growing up as a little kid, I'd felt the Spirit. I'd, go, and I can remember in primary singing, "The Spirit of God like a fire is burning," and I'd feel it. And so, yeah, I was a conflicted teenager for sure. My senior year of high school, I started dating a non-Mormon girl, and I still had in the back of my head that, I'm going to end up going on a mission, but then things started getting serious with this girl. And so I actually decided I wasn't going to go, and I told everybody. I told my mom, and they cried, and I went up to Utah State, and that was my plan, was just to go to school, and I kind of thought I was going to end up marrying this girl. And when things didn't work out then, I had kind of thought I had shut the door on that. And so I was pretty just floating around trying to figure out what I was going to do. And I decided, maybe I should give this church and mission thing another shot. And so I hadn't gone to church the whole time. I had moved up to Logan and was going to school up there. So I started driving down on Sunday to Ogden. It's just 45 minutes, and going to my family ward at home, and started reading the Book of Mormon. And I started to feel better. I started to feel good, and my parents were super happy to see me at church, and I was getting a lot of positive feedback, and it felt great. And I read the Book of Mormon in a couple of weeks, and I said, I feel really good, so I'm going to go on a mission. And I always kind of, throughout my whole mission, I used that as kind of my Alma the Younger experience, that I had strayed, but then I had come back, and I had felt so good that it's got to be the Holy Ghost telling me that this is for sure true. And I used that as my testimony for up until my faith crisis, like the next 10 years of my life. I used that experience of, that was me gaining my sure testimony.
Did you feel like you had a relationship with God? Did you try to have one?
Growing up, not so much.
Prayers and stuff?
Yeah, I wasn't big on praying. Wouldn't say I really started praying until I started going through the repentance process to be able to go on a mission.
You had transgressed.
Yeah.
So did you have to talk to a general authority to be able to go on a mission?
No, I wasn't that bad.
Okay.
No, luckily I had a really good bishop. You talk about the ecclesiastical roulette, and mine was, he made me jump through some hoops, but he was pretty good at just listening. And my number one goal was to be clean when I went out on my mission. And so I remember showing up at my bishop's house, because I'm like, hey, I forgot to tell you about this one thing I did. And I'm sure he got so sick of me but I was hell-bent on being clean when I went out on my mission. And so every little mistake I could ever think of, I wanted to make sure I confessed and was forgiven. And so that's, to your question about a relationship with God, that's when I really started to pray and started to feel like, the atonement became active in my life. And so by the time I left, I felt pretty good.
How was your mission?
Well, it was good. I went to Oklahoma, so it wasn't exciting. It wasn't an exotic place. And I was really never in Oklahoma. I served in Missouri and Arkansas most of the time. And for the first 20 months of my mission, I took that fire and zeal that I had from, going through that, coming back to the church process. And that is what carried me. I did get burnt out the last couple months. I got drunky and I was ready to come home and get on with life. But I thought a pretty good missionary. I worked hard and I played hard, but I tried to keep the rules, and I was engaged, and I felt like I was there because I wanted to be there, not because I, I had already broke my parents' heart and told them I wasn't going to go. So when I went, it was because that's what I wanted to do.
You met Mel's criteria.
I did.
That's why we're married.
Did you have any baptisms, any success?
Yeah, teens maybe. I don't think it was a super high baptizing mission.
But over 10?
Over 10, yeah. I knew at one time, but I don't.
Yeah.
I didn't keep in contact with any of them. I was a lot closer with the members. I really tried to activate people because that's who I related to.
Having been inactive yourself.
Having been inactive, and so I'd share my conversion story, kind of like a badge of honor, no, I know, I'm not here just because Daddy's going to buy me a truck for going, because I had companions like that, I was there because I knew that the Book of Mormon was true, and that's where I needed to be. So
how in the world did you come off your mission and snag Mel?
I'm sneaky. So I got home, and the plan was for me to go back to Utah State, but I didn't have any money. So I just moved back to Logan, started working, and I kind of worked throughout that winter. And so it was I hadn't been home 4 or 5 months before we met, but part of getting home was I was excited to start dating again, and so I looked up girls I knew from high school and from before, and had kind of exhausted all those possibilities. But I wasn't in school, and there were no girls where I worked, so it was hard to get out and meet girls. And we finally had a really nice day in Logan. You know how the winters can be. It was a rough winter, lots of snow. And so we finally had a nice spring day, and I was thinking, man, where are the girls going to be?
I know the story.
You know the story I told you in Vegas.
Wasn't a dog involved?
Yeah, don't give it away.
Oh, sorry.
No, it's so I tried to get my buddy to go be a wingman, and I'm like, I guarantee there's going to be some girls at the park at First Dam, right down the hill from Utah State before you head up Logan Canyon. There's a nice little park, and I'm like, I guarantee there's going to be girls there today because it's finally a nice day. My buddy wouldn't come with me, so I grabbed the shop dog from work, a little puppy, and I took the puppy to the park, and the puppy ran right up to Mel's blanket. I had to chase the puppy, and that's how we met.
Mel, what was it like when you first saw Stu?
Such a sucker. Fell for the puppy. Kick myself all the time. Oh, that's so funny. So for me, I had a entrepreneurship class I was supposed to go to, and normally I'm I don't ever miss school, never miss classes. But I remember about to walk through that door, and there was this big glass window, and I looked through the window, and it was the sun was shining. It was nice outside, like you said, after a long, cold, dreary winter. And I'm like, I just want sunshine. I had a marketing job after school, so I'd have to book it after class, go to my job. And I never saw the sun because I'd get out when it was dark. So I just remember looking out the window, and this was a class that he just did random pop quizzes. So there was no test. You just had to show up, and then he'd randomly do a quiz for whatever we talked about that day. So if you just showed up, it'd be easy, you'd get an A there. But if you didn't show up, it'd drop you down a half a step. So you'd go from an A to an A minus, just for missing one day. So it was a big jump, a risk not to go. But I remember being I graduate in 2 months. I already have a good GPA. I already had my career lined up with Mervyn's when they were in business as an assistant store manager, making good money and all of that. So I'm who cares if my GPA drops a little bit? I'm gonna go get some sunshine. So that was unlike me to do that, to miss class. I always went, So I didn't go. I went and got a blanket, went to First Dam, put my blanket down on this grass, looked at the water, took my shoes off. I'm doing gymnastics on the ground, just playing around, having fun, enjoying the sunshine. And then, I was just sitting on my blanket for a little bit, looking at the little pond there. And then this little dog went up to the water, not too far from my blanket, and I just made a comment to Stu, the cute boy that was standing there. Oh, looks like your dog wants to go in the water, wants to go play. And he's like, yeah, too bad he's a wussy and too afraid to get in. And anyway, so we started small talking after that, and And then I was like, okay, we chatted for a little bit. And then I'm like, okay, I need to pack my stuff up and got to go to my marketing job. So he helped me get my blanket and everything and put it in the back of my trunk. And so we were just still chatting. He's like, yeah, we should, hang out sometime. I'm like, okay. So we exchanged phone numbers and we hung out the next night and the next night and the next night. And pretty much every night since we met, we just hung out. And it was weird. It was like my friends would ask me, oh, what are you doing tonight? And I wouldn't even have to have like talked to Stu. It was assumed like, oh, I'll be hanging out with Stu. And it was kind of like him, the same thing. It was just like we just knew we were going to hang out with each other. And it wasn't usually like that with other people. Like we just hit it off. And anyway.
So from meeting to engagement to marriage, how many months?
Oh, this is embarrassing.
Or is it Mormon?
It worked out.
It's super Mormon.
Yeah.
Is it embarrassing or normal?
No, I guess it's normal. It's just funny, I have to preface, because I was like the anti-boyfriend type, like didn't want to be in a relationship. I'd get sick of guys after a month because I hated being tied down.
Yeah.
I was a big flirt. I liked to date and I liked to go dancing and just have fun and be free. Like I don't want anyone caging me up and feeling like I have to be controlled. And so, yeah. So so I was in no hurry to get married. I didn't want it. I thought I was going to be graduating and moving out of state, so I didn't want to meet anybody. I was going to have my career, making good money, wanted to have my own apartment, had all these dreams of what I was going to do. So that being said, 2 months after we met, we were engaged. 2 months after that, we were married. So 4 months from meeting and got married. Yeah.
Yeah.
So Mormon.
It was crazy.
Yeah.
But the whole time we were dating in Logan, we knew she was going to move away at the end of the semester because she was going to graduate and already had a job. And so I figured that, okay, we'll date. And then when she leaves, I'll go find someone else to date because it was just too soon.
Yeah.
But when she actually moved away, I went, oh, crap. I don't want to date anybody else.
Yeah.
And so that's really when we got serious.
That's when we realized how much we loved each other.
Yeah.
And that was for me too. I'm like, I meet cute, fun guys all the time. This is just another cute, fun guy. Cool, it was fun hanging out with him, but peace out, So I didn't think anything of it. I moved back to Orem, was going to be living there just for a few weeks before my training started with Mervin's management program. But when I was home that week, I remember every day I was and we'd talk on the phone, but I was just starting to get almost sick to my stomach, oh my gosh, I miss this guy like crazy. And when we'd end our phone calls, I like you, that just doesn't sound right. It was oh my gosh, I love him. I like you is too weak of a word. I need to tell him I love him. And so I wrote this poem and ended saying that I love you at the end of the poem. And then we ended up hanging out and getting together. And 5 or 6 days later, a week later, I don't know. And then we were at a park and then he ended up telling me he loved me. I was like, oh, wait a minute. And then I read my poem and said, I loved you. So we both were on the same page of we need to tell each other we love each other. But yeah, so it happened way quicker than I realized, but it was just right,
How did you know that he met your kind of Mormon standard? Because you had high standards, right?
Yes, I did.
How did you know he met your Mormon standards?
Yeah, it's a good question. Well, I remember, first of all, when he had told me, you know what, Mel, I feel like you're the right one for me. I've gotten my, revelation or whatever that I want to marry you and that you're the person for me to marry. I was okay. And he's you need to get your own answer, which was good. And I'm oh my gosh, how do I know? And I was always afraid of marriage because I got sick of guys so quickly. And I always dated really good guys that treated me really good. I always had good confidence in myself. I never put up with crap. I didn't need a guy. I was fine not having one. So I wasn't a needy person that needed somebody to love me. I didn't care about that, But yeah, I remember driving through the canyon and being oh my gosh, this is scary. I don't want to marry someone because I'm when I get married, I'm going to be married forever. I'm not going to get a divorce. I need to make sure this is the right person and that we can work through things together. And I remember driving through the canyon thinking, okay, Melinda, if you break up with this guy, what does he not have that you're looking for in an eternal companion? What is it that he doesn't have of why you'd break up with him? I'm nothing. He has everything. He's a returned missionary. He's a sweetheart. He's so good to me. He cares about my needs. He can apologize. He's sensitive. He's just a sweetheart, And And so I'm like, nothing, like he has everything. So like, why would I let him go? Because I thought that too, like, hey, this has been a short time. My goal originally was date a guy at least a year. I want to see him through holidays. I want to get past the honeymoon phase of dating, because I know there's, I was realistic. I knew there was that where like, oh, anyone can be good and perfect and seem amazing and check all the boxes the first few months and fake it. So I had all these rules for myself. I wanted to date someone a long time. So I was fine with doing that, but it was just I don't know. It was just like, I just wanted to be with this guy. And being away from him that week, I'm like, I can't be away from him. Like, it makes me sick not being around him. Like, I just love him, and I just want to be with this guy. So he had everything.
Did you know about his waywardness in high school, about his girlfriends, about his occasional drinking? Did you guys not bring that up, or?
Yeah, we talked about that a bit. Mm-hmm. So yeah, and I
that
didn't
wasn't
really care.
a big red flag for you,
No,
like
I never cared about that.
throbbing sin.
No, that never fazed me. Like, if I dated guys like that, because I really believe in the atonement and forgiveness. I'm like, I don't care what people did before. What I care about is, where are you now? Where are you headed? I don't care about the past.
And for you, where was he at the point you were married?
He was good. Like, he had cleaned up his life. I know he had done stuff in the past, but I'm like, he cleaned up his life. He had his conversion process of coming back to the church and serving a mission. And so I don't really care what he did before. The fact that he was over that, I'm like, kids can screw around in high school and do different things. I'm like, whatever, just as long as you move past that. Sometimes it's a phase. You got to work it out of your system. Like, I didn't really make it a big deal. Just as long as you've really changed, though. If you didn't really change, then bye.
All right.
So, yeah.
So what did the church mean to you guys in the early years of your marriage?
Yeah.
And did you make commitments to each other, covenants with each other, as a part of your marriage, as it related to the church? In other words, were God, Christ, the church, a part of your agreement?
Yeah, I don't know if we sat down and said, okay, I promise I'm going to always be in the church, but we did talk about our goals, and I think that's one thing that I was attracted to her, is it felt like we had similar goals. We talked about wanting to, be young, successful, and have time and money so we could serve in the church.
Yeah, I remember him mentioning wanting to serve a mission together, like when we got older, and he would make that comment a lot, like he thought that'd be really cool. And for me, like, I was like, I didn't really care. I'm like, I don't feel like I need to do that, but I was like, oh, maybe it would be cool. But yeah.
And was it just sort of understood that you would both stay committed to the church and that you would raise your kids in the church? And was that?
Yeah, and that was definitely.
Was that part of the deal?
Yeah.
Yeah, that was definitely part of the plan, because we talked about, I kind of had this idea that, the Lord can't use you if you're not able to be used. If you don't have time, if you don't have resources, the Lord can't call you to stuff. And so that was kind of the goal, was just to spend our life raising our family and serving in the church.
So when did things start, like how many years was it before the plan started to take the
curveball.
curveball?
We got married, we moved to Salt Lake for a while. We were involved in a family ward there. I don't think we had any super special callings, but we were active and we're doing our thing. We always wanted to move back to Logan, and so I bought my brother out of the moving company, and that's what moved us back to Cache Valley. And so we moved back, decided we wanted to start having kids. Struggled with that. We struggled with infertility for about 7 years. Actually tried to go through adoption through LDS Family Services, but through the whole time we were active. But if I'm being really honest, I started getting just bored with church, and it started to feel more like just a obligation to go. I never felt like I was really getting anything out of it. But I felt like, well, that's where I need to be. So I'd feel guilty because I didn't want to go. I'd go, but I'm like, man, I just don't have that same fire and burning, and it the same lessons over and over again, the correlated, mind-numbing. It just got boring. And I felt bad about that. But we were still active, hadn't made any changes. And so it was 4 or 5 years ago.
So you were what age?
Maybe around
I was 30, yeah.
This is around 2002?
About, yeah.
Okay.
No.
That'd be 2000.
Sorry, 2012.
2012. Yeah, 2012.
Okay, sorry.
Yeah. So I had a buddy from my mission, Robin Day. Hey, Robin. One thing I love about Robin is he is super outspoken. Like, you know where this guy stands. He will, I don't think he does it anymore, but he would get on Facebook and he would, if you're wrong, or he would argue his opinion all day long. And so, but he was always super strong in the church. And one day he posted a New York Times article about a man named Hans Mattsson, who was a general authority in Sweden, who was questioning his faith over historical issues. And I remember...
So high-level Mormon leader.
Yeah.
And we've interviewed Hans on Mormon Stories, yeah.
Right. So he posted that article, and he didn't comment at all. And I read the article, but his comment section just started blowing up. People were defending the church, and other people were starting to say, oh, well, what about this? What about Joseph's wives? And I was reading these comments going, I'd never heard of any of these things. And I was like, I couldn't understand why a high-level leader would question the church over historical stuff. That I was born and raised in the church. I went on a mission. I read the mission library again and again and again, because you could only read the 5 books. And there was that tiny little book on church history in the mission library. And so I thought, I know church history. I couldn't understand why this guy would be questioning over historical stuff. And still, my buddy Robin hadn't commented. And I probably wouldn't have even read anything if I realized that he had left. But what he did is he posted that article, and then he went to work and didn't check Facebook all day. So by the time he got off work, there were 80 to 100 comments from believers and unbelievers going back and forth, and I had read all of them. And finally I saw that Robin had commented, and I fully expected him to come in and defend the church. And he's like, yeah, like I've left, and I was blown away. And I was a little scared, like, man, maybe there's something actually to this. But I put it on the shelf, and I tried not to think about it. But it was back there in my head. And again, at this time, I was going to church, but I just wasn't super enthused about it. And I finally got to a point saying, okay, I need to look into some of this information, but I'm going to do it from a faithful source. And maybe this is a good thing. Maybe this is going to reinvigorate my testimony. And so I picked up Rough Stone Rolling. So written by a member of the church, bought a Deseret book. This will answer all my questions, and it will strengthen my testimony, and maybe I'll get some of that zeal back that I had on my mission. And so I started reading that, and I travel for work. I own this moving company. I don't do a lot of moving, but I do some of the long distance jobs. And so I had a job from Logan to Phoenix, and I wasn't very far into Rough Stone Rolling, but I started driving and was trying to find something that I could listen to as I drove. And so I Googled to see if there was any audiobooks from Richard Bushman, who wrote Rough Stone Rolling, and I found, he did this several-hour interview with this podcast called Mormon Stories. And so I downloaded that, and I listened to that while I was driving. And in between Vegas and Phoenix, I had to pull over on the side of the road, and I just started bawling, because I knew that I had crossed some line, that my simple, naive testimony was gone. And I could never go back to the way it was before. And I knew that I didn't know then that the church wasn't true, but I knew that I wasn't going to be the same, and that this is going to be a turning point in my life. And I cried because I didn't know what it was going to do to my marriage. We had one little boy at the time, and you know, I everything came through like, if I find out this isn't true, how's this going to affect my family? How is this going to affect my kids? Where we live now in Cache Valley, all of our neighbors are Mormon. Who's going to want to play with a, you know, kid of the apostate? And I was devastated because I knew the narrative that I grew up, that I taught on my mission, just wasn't true. And on that podcast, Richard Bushman did his best to, you know, defend it, but I knew I was going to need to do a lot more investigating at that point.
What was it about the podcast that wasn't convincing that, oh, everything's okay because a patriarch and a stake president and the church's foremost Joseph Smith scholar was still in it and believing? Why wasn't Richard Bushman's testimony convincing to you at the time? Were there holes or cracks in it, or?
Yeah, I just think because he was verifying that all of those horrible things that people had said on Robin's thread,
like what,
were true. That, yeah, Joseph had teenage brides. He married other men's wives. There were problems with the Book of Abraham. All of it. It just, every little piece that I thought I knew, there was another side to that story. And he was verifying that, yeah, this is factual information. It wasn't just evil anti-Mormon lies. I mean, I served in the Bible Belt. We encountered anti-Mormon stuff all the time, but it was always of the God-maker variety where they just put a weird twist on stuff. I remember being in a Christian bookstore on my mission, and there was a book on the Mormons, and I was thumbing through it, and it was talking about the temple. It was talking about these weird penalties that they did in there, and I went through the temple after those were taken out. So I was like, this is garbage. This isn't true. And so I considered all anti-Mormon stuff just twisted lies. And so I really wasn't afraid to look into the actual history because I was sure I was going to find out, okay, it's okay. And I was going to have a foundation on a sure testimony, on a sure foundation, not built on, you know, these half-truths that I had grown up. You know, and on the mission too, I spent 2 years of my life defending Joseph Smith. You know, people would come with accusations and I vigorously defended him. And when I found out that, man, I was wrong, I didn't know the whole story, it really was devastating to me.
What's devastating about defending Joseph Smith?
I loved singing the song Praise to the Man. I love, you know, you sing it with vigor, you sing it with conviction. And when you sing praises to a guy that, in my opinion, used his position to prey on people, to take advantage of them. And we can get into it later, but I mean, I really think the guy was a con man. And when you defend a con man, and you spend 2 years of your life going out and sacrificing and being ridiculed for, you know, we had stuff thrown at it. Like, we weren't persecuted, but, you know, people would yell, people would throw stuff out the window at us, and yeah, it's, when you find out you really were on the wrong side, it's a kick to the gut.
So you come home from this trip feeling like you were never going to be the same. What was your trajectory after that?
My plan was just to...
And we're still 2012-ish?
2012-ish, yeah. Okay. My plan was just to get to the bottom of it. I remember calling and talking to Robin, and saying, what is up with this? And he's like, yeah, like, he was really good at just saying, you got to figure this out yourself. He pointed me to some resources. I decided, I'm going to finish Rough Stone Rolling. I'm going to read only church approved stuff, but I knew I had to get to the bottom of it. And I talked to some family members that had gone through a faith crisis, and they gave me horrible advice. And that was, don't tell your wife. She'll leave you. Just figure it out and then talk to her. And so that was my plan, was just to study, to read. We hadn't really talked about it. I know when I had first read that comment on Robin, I just mentioned to her, I'm like, because she had met Robin before, she knew him. We'd gone to dinner with them a few times, and I said, Robin left the church. She said, oh, that's horrible. Like, that's, just, you don't ever do that. And I'm like, oh, I would never. She's like, I don't think I could handle it if you did that. And so I was scared to talk to her about it. So my plan was to not. But I dove in, being self-employed, I have a lot of time, and I stayed up late, and I studied, and I read everything I could get my hands on. And I remember one day reading about some of the changes that were made to the Book of Mormon from the original to what we have now. And I remembered that on one of my moves, I was out in Palmyra, New York, and I had picked up from the Granite bookstore there, original duplicate copy of the Book of Mormon. And I bought it just because I thought it would be cool to put on my shelf. And I was like, I still have that. I wonder if it shows the changes. And so I went downstairs, Melinda was gone, and I got out my Mission Book of Mormon, and I got out the Book of Mormon I had bought, and I was looking up, and sure enough, there were quite a few changes in there.
Was it just grammatical changes, or?
That's what I had always heard. Oh yeah, it was just grammatical stuff. But stuff like changing, when Nephi sees in a vision in the original, he sees God. And then it's changed to the Son of God. To a Mormon, that's a big difference.
Yeah.
Because we believe in God the Father and God the Son. And that's one thing on the mission is, oh, you guys aren't really Christians because you don't believe in the Trinity. And so we defend, the Mormon view of the Godhead, that no, they're totally separate people. The Holy Ghost is different. And, one of the things I had been reading Grant Palmer's book at that time, Insider's View of Mormon Origins. And, he talks about Joseph's changing view of the Godhead. And sure enough, I'm like, man, that sure seems like he's talking about a different person. So in that context, it seemed like a really big change to me. And as I'm reading that, Melinda comes home and comes downstairs. And it was worse than if she would have caught me looking at porn. Because porn's a big deal to Mormons. And I was, and like, what are you doing? I'm just reading my scriptures. Don't worry about it. And that wasn't like me to, have all my scriptures out and just, looking at stuff. And so that's when I decided to go against my buddy's advice. And I just told her everything, just spewed, okay, well, I've found out this information and I don't know what to do, but I'm really scared. And
what do you remember him telling you, Mel?
I don't know if I remember exactly, just all the stuff that he had studied. And I remember being like, well, I don't know if this was before, but just frustrated. Like, at first I was like kind of mad at Robin for doing that post. Because of him doing that post, he's the one that like, if he didn't do that post, then my husband wouldn't be like doubting and having all these questions and doing all this. So I remember like kind of being mad at him at first, but then I was like, okay, Melinda, get real. Like, don't shoot the messenger. It's not him. It's the information that you're mad at, So I was able to like separate from it. But I don't know, he just shared, he had showed me some of the stuff and like the scriptures, I think the differences. And by me, I was like all in. This was new. This was like dropping a bomb on me. So you got this strong believer, 100% faithful, like even if there was stuff, I wasn't going to internalize it. It was like, oh, we just don't know, or oh, there's changes, like just justify everything. So I don't remember all the details. I just remember him sharing. We talked for a good couple hours. It was like 10:30 at night, so it was late when we started this conversation. But I remember just being in a really good place of just listening to him. So I didn't really say anything. And it helped. I just got done from this training that had gave me really good like tools. I just finished this training like 2 weeks ago.
What was it called?
Impact training in Bluffdale. So I went through these trainings, and it's an experiential one. So there's no taking notes or anything. It's all day long for 3 days. And you work through everything just there. So when you leave, like, I don't know, it was amazing. It was life-changing for me.
Why were you going through training?
I had just hit a point in my life where I couldn't find happiness, and it didn't make sense to me. Like,
So
I
the
just wasn't
gospel
happy.
wasn't bringing you happiness.
Yeah, and I wouldn't have like pinned it on that of like, oh, it's the church, the gospel. But we had our boy, which we'd struggled for, 8 years from when we had our boy, and that was a hard thing to go through. That infertility process was really hard. Seeing everyone else get pregnant. His younger brother had 3 kids before us. He's 4 years younger, and they just kept having him. I was just like, oh my gosh, so that was hard. But we got through that. We had our cute boy, he was 1 or 2 years old. We were okay financially. We lived in a great neighborhood. We had friends. Like, there was no reason not to be happy. And Stu's like, I just remember him being sincere with me one time and like, Melinda, like, I just feel like I can never make you happy. And that just kind of broke my heart.
I see you as a really happy person.
Yeah.
So was it just you presented happy, but inside you weren't feeling what you thought?
Maybe. Yeah. And it didn't make sense to me because I'm like, on paper, logically, like, I should be happy. Like, I'm living the dream life right now, basically. We can travel, we can do fun things, we're not stressed about money, we've got good jobs. Like, what is the problem? And so I was like, I've got to figure this out. And so I remember one of his buddies that he had known had told me 2 years before that he had gone to this training. And he said he went to it like 20 years ago, and he used the tools every day of his life from that training. I'm like, wow, that's impressive. Like, he did this training 20 years ago, and he's still using the tools from it. Like, I've gone to motivational seminars, and it's like you're pumped for a week or two, and then you just go back to doing whatever. Like, that's just typically how it is with everything that I've experienced. So he had given me that information. Like, oh, that sounds cool. I've always been a self-improvement person. If I'm going to read a book in high school or college, like on the side, it's going to be in like one that's going to make me a better person or make more money or Mechanic to Millionaire, like all these different books or whatever. I don't want to just waste my time reading a novel. For me, that was a waste. If I'm going to spend time doing something, I want to improve myself. I've just been wired like that. So anyways, I kind of put that on the shelf. Like, oh, cool, that training sounds cool, but I don't care to put my time and money into that right now. So anyways, the 2 years later is when I was realizing I was in this funk. He was just super sweet and sincere and made that comment like, I don't know if I can ever make you happy. And he had teared up and I'm like, what is my problem? Why can't I find happiness? Like, what is wrong with me? So I was like, I don't care what it's going to take. I said, Stu, give me this number of your friend. I got the number. I texted him. I said, what was the name of that training you went to? So I got that and I went to it and I called them and I asked them a bunch of questions because I had no clue what it was about. And then I went to that. And
what were some of the breakthroughs? Can you even name a few breakthroughs from that training?
Yeah, for sure. It was interesting when I went through that training because, like, in Mormonism, they teach you, like, forgive, be loving, like, all these great things that sounds awesome. But when it comes to, like, being practical and using it, like, how do I actually do that? When someone really offends me or hurts me or my child, how do I really forgive them in that? Like, I need some tools or steps, but I feel like that's where Mormonism was lacking, is they'd say, like, oh, be an amazing person, just forgive people 1,000 times over and over, and all these things. They'd say, hey, go be perfect. Good luck. Like, okay, like, I really want to know how to do that. Like, I have questions of, like, let's process through this, and that was never, I felt, given. It was just like, go read your scriptures. And I tried to do that, but it just, I don't know. It just wouldn't work for specific things. Like, okay, I read my scriptures, but do I respond this way or this way to this person? Like, it just didn't have all the answers. And so it was just amazing coming out of this training because I was like, oh my heck, like, they actually, it was amazing. Like, I had experiences there that was like, this feels like heaven. Pieces of it. I was like, I've never felt that much love in my entire life by so many people. Like, you just feel 100% like accepted and loved. and it just completely changed my outlook. And
Were there experiences that started tweaking your religious worldview?
I think so, yeah, actually.
How?
Because, you know, Mormon, like the LDS Church is supposed to be God's one and only true church. And I felt like it's not really helping me where I need it. And I go to this training that's not an LDS church. Like, I think the church even suggests not to go to it. And I'm like, that changed my life more than anything I've ever experienced my whole life of Mormonism. And that actually gave me tools to be a better person. It inspired me. Where the church, although I love the church and I had happy experiences with it, I feel like a lot of it was like kind of fear-based. Like, Melinda, you don't want to break the rule because God, like, I always wanted to make my God happy. So I was like, I don't ever want to let him down. I want to go to him with pure and clean hands. And
I just want to note that I had to ask you like 5 times what your life goals were. And every time I asked you, you mentioned things you weren't supposed to be doing. And for me, that, I don't know if you remember
yeah,
earlier
I
in
did.
this
You're like,
interview,
Melinda, get with
I'm
it.
like, what about your life goals? And you're like, well, let's see, no drinking, no premarital sex.
Yeah, that's not really
like,
life
I had
goal.
to ask 5 times. And I think it just shows that so much of your religious worldview was about what you weren't going to do.
Yeah.
The sins you
Don't
weren't
break
going
the
to
rule.
commit.
Yeah.
And that's not necessarily a recipe for joy, right?
Yeah, right.
Don't do this, that, or the other. Does that bring joy, not doing things? So you were looking for actually things to help you have joy.
Yeah.
Right?
Yep. And it was amazing going through this training. It was like, oh my gosh, like finally, like it's not fear, guilt, shame basing me into being good. And I was like, oh my heck, I started realizing like that's what the church was doing. I had never really realized or thought about that before because I was happy, like, or thought I was, I don't know. And then I go to this training and I'm like, oh my heck, like it's all just be loving, respect the other person. Even though we're married, what I got out of that is like, we're not the same person. And he can change and he can have different views and beliefs, and that's okay. And I don't get to come out of fear, and I don't get to guilt him or shame him for how he's feeling. Like, and since it was experiential, it was just, I don't know, it was powerful and it was impactful of like, no, like it just gave me huge just tools and resources to get through this. So like the timing couldn't have been better. And I really honestly feel like if I hadn't gone through that training, the timing was just amazing because it was 2 weeks after I'd finished that he had dropped this bomb on me basically. And I would have been in tears. I would have been devastated. I would have been crying. I would have been freaking out. I would have been in so much like, you know, but this had told me like, no, it's okay. Like it just, I don't know. And so that's why I was able to just, when he shared that with me that night, I just sat there and I just listened to him. I just barely got done from this training. I learned everything I needed to do. And I'm like, I'm just going to love him. I'm going to be here for him and support him. And I'm just going to listen to him. And he just shared everything.
In some ways, that's so not Mormon, because the message you get in Mormonism often is there's one truth, and husband and wife need to be on the same page about that truth. No deviation. And this whole accept them for who they are and what they're experiencing. No. It's you know, play by the plan, stay on plan, right?
Yeah.
Well, I think the next day that fear kind of sunk in, right?
Yeah. So in the morning I woke up and I like, so yeah, then all this, because I go to my future. That's just what I do. Like I start thinking, what is the future going to look like? We have this child, like, and I always just want to be on the same page for my kid. That was a big ultimate goal of like, that's why I wanted to marry someone strong in the church, is because it's like our kids that we have need to see us being strong together and just being positive about being all in the church or whatever we're doing. Like it's very important for a kid to see that. Otherwise it's confusing for them. One parent's doing one thing or saying one thing, the other parent's saying or doing another. It messes with the kid. And I didn't want that for my child. I wanted to raise them with just solid confidence and be grounded. And so that's why it was important to be on the same page. So that was a big deal. So the fear started coming in and of like, oh no, like, and then I'm starting to picture like, oh my heck, if he leaves the church, then he's going to be at home. I'm going to want to go to church. I'm going to want to take the kids. And then the kids will be like, I want to stay home with dad. Because of course they don't want to go to 3 hours of boring church. So I'm like, I'm going to have to fight a lot harder. So I'm thinking about all of this, like being a single mom, taking my kids, trying, he's not going to care about doing home evening or reading scripture. So I'm going to have to take that on. So I'm seeing more work for myself and like starting to freak out a little bit. But I wanted to be strong for him. And so I like just put my head in the pillow and didn't want him to hear me crying. I was in the room, I shut the door, and I'm just like crying in the pillow, just like thinking about all this and just.
Why were you crying?
Because I was afraid. I was afraid of what that looked like, and just like, oh my gosh, I don't know if I can handle it, but I have to handle it because I'm not going to leave my husband. It wasn't like, okay, I would leave him over this. It was like, we're going to just have to figure it out.
So some Mormons do conclude, I got to leave my spouse.
Yeah.
Why didn't you go there?
Because I loved and adored him, and I knew like his heart he's a good person, and I would never like want to lose that. And I had committed, if I'm going to marry someone, I'm going to be with them forever. I mean, unless it gets too abusive or something like that, I'm not going to put up with crap. I would leave, but that's not what it was. And so that means just because this is a hard thing we're going through, I'm not going to leave him over that. You know, he's still the same amazing, incredible person, and I love him. It's just, we've got to figure this out, and I know it's going to be hard for me, but I have always known that he's my forever guy, and nothing would ever change that. You know, so I'm like, we will work through anything. It may be hard, but like, we'll figure it out together. So I never once thought about leaving him over. It was just, I just knew it was going to be hard, and it was going to be hard for me. And that's what the fear and the crying was about, was like, and our kids. Like, if it was just us and we didn't have kids, I'd be like, cool, whatever. I'm fine going to church by myself. I don't need you to hold my hand and go there, if I believed in it and he didn't. But it was our kids, just thinking about like, we're not on the same page. This is going to be confusing for them. I don't want them to have a harder life, you know? So it was all of that just built up, and I just kind of broke down. And so he came in, he heard me crying, and he was really sweet. And he's like, Mel, like, don't jump to the like worst case scenario. Like, I'll tend to do that. Like, as soon as I think about something, I'll go here, 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 here. And then I get to the end and I'm start freaking out about the end. He's like, okay, we're not there yet. That may not even happen. So he helped kind of calm me down a bit. And he's like, you know what, like, maybe this will be better. Maybe this will actually strengthen my testimony of Joseph Smith. Like, he's like, all I know is I need to figure this out. But he's like, just don't freak out about it. Don't go to the worst, because we don't know what it's going to look like or how this is going to end up. It could actually be better. Things were getting kind of dull for me, so this could help just like strengthen my testimony. So after we had that little talk, it was like, okay, I got out of my little fear place and was like, I get to respect him and just let him figure it out, and then we'll see. So, yeah.